Fabulous. Cool. We got the recording going. Well, thank you guys again so much for making the time today. As some of you may know, my name is Eliane. I am a program coordinator with Colorado Reach, and this is a episode of our Cultural Stories webinar. This month we are highlighting Pride, so we have our featured speakers, Alex Vaughn and Wesley Thomas. I'll let them do a little introduction here in a second. As you guys know, Reach is an education and training nonprofit, mostly focused in Colorado, but we do want to expand our reach, no pun intended. Again, we are an affiliate with Diverse Talent, hence my little name up there. So be sure to check us out. I will pass it to you guys. Wesley, if you want to start us off, a little introduction of yourself.
Sure. So first, Eliane and your team, thank you all for having me be a part of this event. Pride Month is a very busy time for me, just by nature of the work that I do. But just a little bit of background about me. My name is Wesley Thomas. I use he, him pronouns. I am a Philadelphia native. So born and raised, graduate of Cheney University, which is one of the first historically Black colleges in the country. And from there, went to Temple University and Widener University, respectively. My background is in LGBTQ advocacy and sexual and reproductive health. I have an extensive history in Philadelphia doing HIV testing and counseling and peer-to-peer education around prevention. And after moving to the district about almost 10 years ago, a lot of my work has been around advocacy around all topics for LGBTQ people. In my current role with DC Public Schools, I oversee and manage a federal grant that essentially provides funds to provide culturally competent and responsive programming and services for targeted populations. And our district happened to choose LGBTQ folks. So we do a lot of our programming, a lot of our education, a lot of our training and capacity building for the district is funneled through my team and my program. So that is just a little bit about me, and glad to be here.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. Alex, I'll pass it to you.
Again, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. So, my name is Alex. I use Alex Vaughn. I use they, them pronouns. I am a certified personal trainer and group fitness instructor. I've been in the fitness industry for over 20 years. My background, I went to Ohio State University with and I have a exercise science degree. My wife and I co-host a podcast called How to Be Queer, where we kind of have kitchen table conversations about being queer in a heteronormative world. And so yeah, currently I'm a personal trainer and group fitness instructor at Lifetime Fitness here in Westminster, Colorado. I've served as a transgender program coordinator for Youth Scene based in Denver, Colorado for a time, where we support LGBTQ, QT, BIPOC youth and their families. And yeah, that's me.
Perfect. Thank you. And I want to thank you both for taking the time to out of your day. And I know you guys are super busy people, so thanks for making the time for us. We'll just drop right into our questions. And then, of course, as our audience has questions, feel free to send those in the chat and we will be sure to get to those as well. Alrighty, first question on the docket today is, in today's society, how do you see more and or less acceptance of the LGBTQA plus community? And whoever wants to pick that up, I guess, Wesley, we can start with you.
So I think I can answer this from like the professional standpoint and personally. Well, I'll start with personally. I think personally, one of the biggest changes that I've seen, and I'm an older millennial, 87. So I've seen all the media changes and transformations just in terms of representation. I think now more than ever, there are so many diverse images of queer people, whereas I can speak from a personal experience, especially folks that look like me and identify like me. I remember a lot of the people that would be put in roles for people like that were caricatures, right? They only showed one very specific aspect of what it meant to be a Black gay person, whereas now I feel like there's so much diversity with just what's available in media. So that's one big change that I've seen on a personal level. And then I also think professionally, um, seeing, I know obviously we live in a landscape right now where there's a lot of laws and policies that are being put on the books that are anti-trans, anti-LGBTQ. However, I do also see that there are also places across the country that are being very adamant about taking pro stances towards the community, which I also think is a change, because some folks were kind of like, you're here maybe, but like we don't actually have to specifically care about this population of people. But I see now more legislators are seeing the importance of being very public and firm in their support of the community. One of the things that just happened out here in Maryland, which was a win for us, is that the new governor signed an executive order that any healthcare professional that provides trans inclusionary or trans-Pacific services cannot be prosecuted in the state of Maryland. We are not extraditing those folks if they perform services for folks that are traveling in from other countries. And essentially, for all intents and purposes, Maryland is a sanctuary state for trans-identified folks. So I know, you see the Florida, you see the Texas, you think things are like that around the country, but there are other places where it has not. It's actually the opposite end of that. So I think that's some of the bigger changes that I've seen.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you highlighting the good mixed in with all of the kind of negative stuff that we're seeing in there. It's good to highlight what is positive and kind of this inclusion. Alex, I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, I feel much of the same way that Wesley does. I think I'll kind of go that personal and professional route as well. Like it's can be so easy to kind of like tune into all of the anti voices and be like, no, we're gonna fight this, but really I subscribe to Erin in the morning on for her material, and so I get like daily updates about like the judge in New York, the first openly trans judge in New York that was just appointed, and then just seeing how in Kentucky, like 2 separate judges also just blocked some anti-trans healthcare. And so I think I'm a Gen Xer, so I'm 45 years old, and so growing up in Ohio, in a suburb of Ohio, it was just complete omission of queerness. And it wasn't like I got any messages like, don't be gay or don't be trans. It was just, this isn't even an option. And so then for me as a non-binary trans person, when I got the word non-binary from my queer therapist at the age of 40, I'm like, oh, this makes sense. So I'm like, everything now makes sense. Even though I came out gay when I was 19 back in the late 90s, but there was just the 2 options. And now this ever expanding, like, because we as humans are just like the universe that kind of believe in, we're ever expanding. And so the visibility of what it means to be human is just really kind of like infiltrating. And I say that in a positive way, this positive disruption of queerness everywhere.
Absolutely. And like you said, there's not one way or the other. It's not so black and white. And so having these, whether it's terms or just relatable identities for people to attribute themselves to and have that almost that like that sense of belonging that is, in like you mentioned, such a heteronormative world, so important. And again, we're all humans, nobody is alike, everybody's so different. So to have a place where somebody is included is just so important, and just a sense of being a human being. Alrighty, how do you guys think we can build an atmosphere of inclusion regardless of personal and or religious views? Wesley, you're on mute.
Can you repeat that one more time? I'm so sorry.
No worries. No, you're good. How can we build an atmosphere of inclusion regardless of personal or religious views?
Oh yeah. So I definitely think that where possible, policies are a great first step. Just having something that's essentially the law of the land, or your employment space, or your school system, whatever, something that outlines how folks are respected around identity and expression, because I think it's very important to separate those two things, that identity and expression of people are not always going to be congruent, and we have to honor and respect both parts of that. um, and I think one of the things that is really important is that um, when we're highlighting affinity groups, for lack of a better term, right? Making sure that we're running the gamut, right? Like we don't just stop at BIPOC and LGBTQ, right? Like there's so many other folks that continue to be erased as we're seeking to further be inclusive, right? So making sure we're including Indigenous folks, Latinx folks, Asian Pacific Island folks. It's very important. Like when you create a culture where all of those identities are celebrated, then it's not abnormal to see these other folks, thriving in your place of work, your communities. So it's just important to, if you're going to be inclusionary, that you're doing it from all angles, not just like, oh, we know we need to be LGBTQ inclusive, so we're going to throw rainbow flags up, we're going to celebrate Pride, but it's like understanding the impacts that that can have on other marginalized groups. Because as I like to say, um, you know, dominant culture would love to see minority groups play the oppression Olympics, as I like to call it, which is like, everybody's kind of clawing and scraping for the gold medal of who has it the worst, versus we're all kind of under this system that doesn't allow us to thrive. So how do we kind of collectively seek power to be able to have all of our voices heard? And so, yeah, not just centering one specific marginalized group, but continuing to keep the floor open for how can we celebrate all diverse backgrounds, and making sure too that whatever your institution is, that the folks that have voices are reflective of those communities. So always great to have advocates and allies, but it's always better to hear from those populations what their needs are. So it's also important to make sure that those voices are present when you're going through your transformations.
Absolutely. No, I love what you said there. And there's almost like power in numbers there. It's not some group's issue is worse than another. Let's just all back each other. And at the end of the day, meet the common goal of just inclusion and equity. Absolutely. Alex, I'll pass it to you.
I'm kind of I guess I'm going a little like energetic with this. I learned from my wife about the head, heart, hands healing model. And so, building it's in terms of with the question of building the atmosphere of like choosing kind is choosing that the concepts are so simple, like you can apply it to all to many different things, that choosing kind is choosing to like unpack yourself. And that if you can unpack, one thing, you can unpack another thing, and then it kind of creates this momentum of resilience and capacity to be like, oh, I can, even if you are just honing in on, I'm gonna look at this first, and then it just over time, this conscious choice of I'm gonna see this, and so I can see this too, and then I can see this, and I can see this, and I don't know if that's kind of like one dimensional or one kind of a flat way to look at it, but choosing that, just choosing to lean in, and that this constant rupture, and that what we're doing here is this constant rupture and repair. And I like to say, like, stay messy.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
leaning in, even if you mess it up, and what do you need to do to repair the harm?
No, I totally, and that domino effect, the momentum, and kind of having that energy, creating a ripple effect. Absolutely. Great, you guys. Thank you. Since many national LGBTQA plus figures have come out publicly, do you think it's easier for employees and organizations or others to come out in their personal and professional lives? And how much of an impact do you think seeing these bigger public figures and or figures within higher ups of organizations coming out, how do you think that affects kind of the trickle down effect of others feeling included in an organization? Anybody can take that one away. We can just keep it going, Wesley, Alex, if we want. So go for it.
Sure. So I don't think it's a dissenting view. So I'll speak from a couple of places. So being an older millennial, I've seen where, representation, that kind of vocal being out, it meant a lot for people, especially a lot of closeted folks, especially a lot of folks that live in areas that aren't accepting. For me, I'm going to speak from a personal place. I think the challenge now shifts from that, like, for some groups, for some folks, coming out now feels like a commodity, right? Like, it's not as big of a thing anymore. And so even the response from folks both inside and outside the community have changed around that. What I think is, I think it's still important to have representation. Don't get me wrong. What I think is more important is what those people do with their positions of power. Like, so it's okay to be a gay CEO, right? But if your organization, doesn't represent inclusionary values, right? Like, you're a token, for lack of a better term. And even if you are the CEO, right, you can be tokenized as a CEO. It's important to make sure that if the purpose of coming out and kind of making yourself publicly known in this way is to, dispel the myth of what queerness or transness can look like, to show that we can get into some of these places. Also, what pipeline are you creating for the folks that don't have that same experience to potentially get further along? They might not get to where you are, right? But it's one thing to be the first out Black queer, astronaut. But if you're also the only one for the next 30 years, like, that, did we really do the thing that we were supposed to do with this statement? So that's kind of how I feel about it. Like, it's still important to come out, it's still important to be visible. However, when I see a lot of the younger folks that I work with, there's not a lot of pipelines that have been created for them. They're still having to figure out and navigate a lot of the stuff at young ages that I was having to figure out and navigate at a young age. And so, like, mentorship, just community, especially that intergenerational community, I feel like it just has not been as established as it was potentially in the 70s and the 80s. And I also know that the need for community was different because there wasn't digital spaces. So yeah, I think it's important. And I think that moving past that, how are we now creating easier pipelines for younger generations so that, you being the first out, whatever, isn't the last out, whatever, for the next, half century.
Absolutely. I really like what you said about the whole digital community and kind of newer generations. I didn't really think about it that way. And that sense of community, sense of mentorship via the screen definitely is different. So I think that's a really important point to touch on. I appreciate that. Alex, I'll pass it to you.
I don't have anything to add.
Totally fine. No worries. No, I think
mean,
Wesley said it well.
Very, yeah. I just, I had taken some notes earlier, and just that, visibility can make it easier, but I guess I'm still, what you said, Wesley, was so, like, cause my Gen X brain sometimes is like coming out was just so hard. And so I can still see it through that. And for them, like that conscious decision, like remembering that with tech, like, you know, all of the figures, it's just so different.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think really well said. Alex, I'll start with you for this next question. What do you believe is the biggest or most common misconception about trans individuals in today's society? And you can talk about it, from current or maybe growing up, and what you've seen, however you want to interpret this question.
I'm sorry, will you ask that again?
Yes, absolutely. What do you believe is the biggest or most common misconception or misconceptions about trans individuals? A loaded question, I know.
I think this is a topic we could. I'm all I can only speak for myself. I'm not going to speak for an entire community, but as a non-binary person, I've spent a lot of time proving my existence, that how I feel and who I am is real. And then we can see it in news. I see it in the states around us. That, I mean, I feel like we're lucky here in Colorado, but there's still a lot of work to do. But that there's still this element of we're less than, because gender is not. I mean, there's LGBT, like if the neighborhood is the LGBTQ, if the neighborhood is like heteronormativity, there's that LGBTQ cul-de-sac, and on one side of the street is sexuality and the other side of the street is gender. We've known LGBTQ as sexuality for a very long time, and we just know that it's more than that. And so, but they're two separate houses kind of on the same street. And I think a misconception, yeah, I think I kind of said, I don't want to repeat myself. Hopefully that came through.
Oh,
That
absolutely.
To be believed for who we are. It's kind of.
No, I hear you. I think well said, well said. And again, very loaded question. And I'm sure we could have a whole entire webinar just on that one question. So no, I think you did a very clear, concise answer to that. Wesley, do you want to touch on that at all?
Sure, and I obviously can only speak from a professional experience. One of the things that I think is specifically with young trans and non-binary students, this idea that identity and expression are always aligned, right? We have a lot of our trans identified students, I'll say trans feminine students, for folks that aren't aware what that term means. Biologically, you are born male. You currently don't and have not identified as male. You may identify as female, woman, girl, or somewhere outside of the binary. But for some of our students, because of whatever experiences they're having in their communities, in their homes, in their religious spheres, they're not actually able to express their full identity as they would like. So there are students that, I mean, maybe not like me, but they might look like me, right? Like, presenting more masculinely, and are still trans identified folks, right? And so to Alex's point, right, like believe people when they tell you who they are, because for some of our students, right, finances, fear of being kicked out of our homes, fear of being brutalized can prevent a lot of people from dressing, expressing, and having presentations that align with how they identify. I get the question all the time, because DC, we have policies that allow our non-binary and trans students to use bathrooms that align with their identity, right? Like that's a big issue around the country. We just let kids use the bathroom. But a big question that comes up is like, well, what about if a boy pretending that they're a girl wants to use the girls' restroom? It always comes up. It's a very annoying question. The first thing I say is that if the issue is about protecting students from harm, allowing students to use or not to use a restroom should not be the top priority, right? Like there's so many other things that are happening, right? And also, if violence is going to happen in the bathroom, a sign on a door about someone's gender is not going to prevent that, right? So let's talk about policies and practices versus people, so that we're not criminalizing people. But then I also let those folks know that, you know, we can't make assumptions just off of how people look about their identity, because again, all of these factors come into play. I don't have the money to be able to buy clothes that align with how I want to look. I don't have the skills to be able to, you know, put on makeup. I don't have a community that can support me in getting money so that I can get puberty blockers or hormones. So all of those things come into play with me being able to express and look how I identify, and their identity is still theirs and it's still personal and it's still real for them.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think both you guys hit that on the head. That was really, really well said. I know we kind of talked about, you know, allyship earlier, but where do you both think that there's some spaces, or what are some spaces that you think allies or just supporters or just everyone in the world can step up to support the LGBTQA plus community? What are you seeing today, whether it's personally or professionally? Alex, you want to start with this one?
Yeah, I think from a, you know, work perspective of like starting or joining like ERGs, workspaces, learning, you know, allyship is like an act, right? You're like constantly moving, constantly stepping forward, and kind of learning the art of the tuck and roll, like constantly learning how to speak up, and so I think just education, because then when you have the education, you can pull it in, you know, pull it in, and then over time figure out how to put it into action, and just staying open and ready to learn.
Perfect. Wesley, I'll pass it to you.
Um, for this one, I'll mostly speak from a personal place because this is my personal views. I would never say this in a training. I think for me, allyship is important, and it's a great starting place. I think that as society and specifically legislation has become more targeted and more overt about their anti-LGBTQ-ness, that, you know, for some folks, allyship can just be like this passive acknowledgement, like this is an issue, right? I think it's important now in the climate that we're in for folks to take just, you know, whatever that step forward looks like, but it needs to begin to be a journey. I think allyship is a great starting place, but not to get stuck in that place where it's just like, yes, I have the pride flag in June outside of my door. I wave my like Black Lives Matter banner in my window. Like that's great. And what are intentional steps that we're taking to disrupt some of these things in our local and immediate spaces, right? One of the things that I use as an example was like, everybody's not going to make it to a march. Everybody's not going to make it to a rally. Folks can't do a die-in. They can't chain themselves to Capitol Hill, right? However, we can challenge the conversations that we're having in our immediate spaces, right? Especially, and this is for all folks. Like if we're in groups where they're monolithic in terms of like, you know, everybody looks and sounds the same. It's also important to make sure that we're disrupting those conversations, especially as allies, when we're hearing assumptions and generalizations being made, even if it's as a joke, like, you know, people don't like me because I'm that friend where it's like, okay, like I know we're at a drag show and there's jokes being made, but let's not carry that same energy out into the streets in terms of how we're interacting with trans identified folks, right? Like this is a space where it's understood that, you know, there's going to be playfulness around gender. And this is also a very serious topic for some people. So we should not be misgendering folks if they aren't okay with that. We shouldn't be using certain terms, you know, if that is not a person that we know in a way that they can receive that term the way that we intend it to be said, right? And so really, yeah, how with allyship and taking it a step further, like obviously you can't do some of those things, but what can we do to challenge some of the communities that we're part of, whether it's faith communities, whether it's social communities. I'm a big nerd, so I do like cosplaying and stuff like that. So it's like even when I'm at conventions and other nerd spaces, like, you know, how am I leveraging this space to like continue to talk about consent, because that's a space where, you know, consent is a big issue. People are wearing certain cosplays, people think that touch is okay because of how you're dressed. And so, you know, what power do you have in your local and immediate space to shift how communities are talked about? I think that's where allyship and advocacy and co-conspiracy kind of start to develop on each other. Because again, if we're the only people in our lives that are changing around these issues, then we're missing opportunities, especially with our loved ones.
Absolutely. And the self-responsibility aspect of allyship and holding yourself accountable no matter what environment you're in, what community you're in. Absolutely. Yeah, I really liked what you guys both said about how it's a journey. It absolutely is. And Wesley, I like that you acknowledged everybody's kind of got a different starting place. You know, it's just about where are you going to start and then how does that continue? You know, we have people that are out there all the time being in like very public advocates, and then people that are maybe just starting like their journey as an outspoken ally, or not even doesn't have to be necessarily totally outspoken, but everybody has that starting place, and it's just about how you progress beyond that. I love that you acknowledge that the starting places are different, and I think that's important. Fabulous. Alrighty, you guys. What active role do you guys think organizations should play or contribute to when offensive and or harmful comments and actions against LGBTQA+ employees occur in the workplace? Again, big question, and you can touch on maybe experiences that you've had personally in your own professional lives, maybe what you've heard or what you just think organizations should do. Wesley, I'll start with you on this one.
Sure. So I think I go back to my former statement about like having policies in place is also very important. Like if you are a decision maker, if you have power in your organization, put things on the book so that you have a reference point. Because I think when queer and trans people can read, you know, language that affirms them, and you know, in a very public facing document, that is very empowering for that community. I also think, you know, especially if you're an organization committed to this issue from the top down, when issues like this take place, there needs to be some type of correspondence from someone in leadership, right? Like it doesn't need to be the head honcho, but like one of the VPs, someone needs to acknowledge the harm. Because one thing about it can be said about all communities, but I'm going to specifically speak about marginalized communities, that when harm for one person takes place, everyone that's a part of that community has eyes on it, because how you respond to that issue can very much be how someone may respond to your issue, right? So you're kind of tuned in. So it's not just a resolution for that one specific incident, it's now a resolution for the entire community. So it's very important to make a very public facing statement to acknowledge that the harm, not just, you know, without outing people, but to not just to the individual, but to the community, because marginalized folks do have, you know, strong senses of community, specifically in workplaces, right? Or in, you know, certain communities where it's not it's not positively received in those identities. Like, you find ways to kind of cling to one another, surround each other with, support. So it's very important to kind of acknowledge that, yes, this incident happens to this one person, but it has ripples and effects to other members of the community within the organization. I think that's very important. Um, I'm a person that tries to come from a restorative approach. You know, it's challenged daily, but I try to tend to believe in the power of change of people. I hope it can happen. Um, but I like to believe that, when those things happen, how do we work with all the parties, right? Like, tend to the person that's been harmed to make sure that they're okay, that they're accommodated, that we're not putting the burden and brunt of resolution on them to forgive and be okay with this incident. Like, it's well within the right to like not be okay with what happened. And also, as an organization, how do we work to support our employees to make sure that they understand the culture? And right, like, I don't believe in someone misgender someone so that they should be fired immediately. What steps are we taking to make sure that they understand? Because even if termination is the ultimate goal, at least this person knows that, like, now you know what you did wrong and you know why, and you know what steps you could have taken to rectify it. You just made a choice not to, right? So I do think organizations have an obligation to support the harmed and making sure that they're supported. Like, if they need time off, we're not going to like make it a big process for them, like, especially depending on the magnitude of the issue and the person that may have caused the harm. How are we making sure that they not so much supported, but they're getting the services needed so that they know that this is not acceptable? It should not happen again. And if you're going to continue to be a part of this organization, this is the standard that we're holding you to.
Absolutely, the kind of the education around it, the like, hey, okay, let's just check in, kind of almost the intention behind it. Like, where was that? Was that coming from a you didn't know, or that was meant to harm? So important to just kind of acknowledge and address and get the full understanding. I'll kind of pull from something that you said earlier in terms of combating the harm. I like what you said about you need to have people represented in those higher spaces. So you need to have VPs, you need to have the head honchos, like you said, represent the marginalized populations so that, it's not just coming down from historically who we've always seen and like, oh, sorry that happened to you. You got to have that person in there. So I think that's a really good point and kind of a good segue between the two there. Alex, how can you elaborate on this for us?
Yeah, very much in the same vein. I kind of go to, this can happen, can happen at the same time in multiple directions, of where like we're the mentee and the mentor, like at the same time. And that the active role, if we think about creating these cultures that are braver, safer, and I'm just going to say, because I'm a parent, so I kind of look at it like this, I'm learning from my kid, but I'm also teaching them as well. So this punitive, like, you messed up, you're fired, it just doesn't benefit anybody. And that there's this follow through and an accountability on both sides. And I say both sides, but even kind of like, I think in our cultures now, there's this really awesome narrative and discussion around mental health, and it's more than ever. And so, both people, if it's, let's just say, between two people, both people are equally valued and matter, but also, leaning into, well, where is each, as Wesley was saying, where is each person coming from? So then you can kind of, I don't know, for lack of a better word, like mediate, but then, unpack, continuing that process of unpacking. Well, you feel this way, but where's that coming from? And then over time, it just ultimately creates connections. And which is why this I think this work is so important and so hard at the same time, because we're dealing with people's thoughts and feelings and emotions, and we're no longer separating, you know, home and work. It's with which I think is complex.
Absolutely, many layers to this for sure. And it's important to, though it's difficult to integrate the layers, it's necessary to like prosperity in both home and work life. And just again, going back to the basis of being a human being in the world. So, kind of piggybacking off of the last question a little bit, what do you guys think the potholes are that we need to avoid when implementing inclusion efforts in the workplace? This can be in respect to LGBTQA plus inclusion or just general inclusion of marginalized communities. Wesley?
I think my biggest thing is tokenization. I think it's very easy for, you know, depending on the organization, when we're making promotional materials, when we're doing our advertisement campaigns, like let's slap all the like queer and people of color everywhere, knowing that that is not representative of the organization or the spaces they're going to occupy. So don't fall into that pothole. Like, you know, if you know that your organization is, you know, 10% BIPOC, or sorry, Black, Indigenous, people of color, don't have advertisement and materials where every face on there is melanated, right? Like, don't give people false expectations of what they're about to come into. But in your materials, if you're trying to create an environment of inclusion, you can put that in words, right? We don't need to give false images to people. We also don't want to, and this is something that happens to me often, you know, not within my own organization, but in the past, where, you know, it's Pride Month, so now there's this hyper focus. Let's find the person with the most intersecting identities to elevate for this month, to show, look at us, we have this, you know, out Black gay person on Pride Month, aren't we doing so well? Like, let's pat ourselves on the back. No, it at this juncture, it's about what you're doing in the other 11 months that matter more than in June. So don't fall into the pothole of only caring about issues when they have like national days or months of recognition, right? Like Black History Month shouldn't be the only time we care about Black folks. You know, Women's History Month shouldn't be the only time we care about women. These are, you know, these should be things that are happening all year round. So don't fall into the pothole of like, you know, my favorite meme is like, you know, they show all the corporations during the Pride Parade, like June 1st through June 30th. And then you see the meme where it's like everything starts to fade away as they get to July 1st, almost like the Thanos snap. They just disappear. And that's how people recognize, like, it's a running joke because people realize that it's like, yes, come July 1st, about a good 95% of these organizations that have, you know, logos on these floats will not care about these same communities in July. So yeah, that's just a big pothole to avoid.
For sure. And I think that plays into the whole journey talk as well. It's like, all right, like, great, June's Pride Month. Let's go beyond that. It's not just about this, for sure. Alex, how can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think I kind of go that to truly create this amount of change that we're trying to do, and that remembering that, you know, being perfect is just, it'll actually if you're trying to do it perfectly, you're just going to end up procrastinating some things. In that, I guess I just kind of see it like a little bit of yes, let's avoid these things, what we've learned, and then also maybe just the human aspect of like, oh, but when you do fall into a pothole, like how do you come back from it? Which, you know, again, I just my message is I guess, or my perspective is like the humanness of how just this change happens. So I think one thing too is not like investing in the why, like and just being, yeah, it's the both, like, let's avoid these things, and how do we come back when we do fall into something?
Yeah, being able to bounce back from a mistake, or, maybe something wasn't delivered the right way, or, again, I appreciate how you acknowledge, nobody's perfect, no organization or human being is perfect. So to just be able, to get it out there, do what you need to do, obviously educated with education, but doing it in a way, and then, if it's done just not perfect, that's fine, and adjust it how it needs to be adjusted and go from there. More on kind of the topic of the journey, do you guys have a book, magazine, podcast, tool, or any other technique that you'd recommend to our audience to continue their learning when it comes to allyship towards the LGBTQA plus community? Wesley.
I think, I mean, I can recommend a bunch of stuff, absolutely. And I think in my experience, what's the most valuable tool is just listening to folks in the community. And listening with intent, right? Like not listening so that you can get the information so that you can feel like you got it. Um, I come from a matriarchal family. I spent a lot of time in my childhood just taking in a lot of information from the women in my family. Um, and by no means do I think I'm like, the most stellar advocate of women. However, I think there's a lot of things that I learned to be mindful of, especially as a person that's masculine presenting, right? Like, despite my orientation, I still present as male. And so it's still important for me to be mindful, just hearing about the experience that women go through. It's important to check my own behaviors when I'm in certain spaces, right? So yeah, like James Baldwin's amazing. Angela Davis is amazing. There's also a professor out of Northwestern University. His name is Dr. E. Patrick Johnson. He's done a lot of extensive work around Black queer identity, specifically in the South. So finding that intersection between folks that come from the Bible Belt and, knowing that religion is a big part of their identity, and then also reconciling their sexual and gender identity as well. But yeah, I mean, all of that is good. And if you have people in your life that identify in this way, again, without tokenizing them, don't be like, hey, I want to sit down and have a serious conversation. Tell me all the ways that you're impressed in society. Like, that's not the way to go about it. But being authentic and wanting to create time to where you're learning about people in the same way that you would, learn about a friend, a colleague, a family member. Invest that time in being with those folks and occupying their spaces, right? Like, don't invite your queer friends to another straight event, you know, and and sometimes taking that additional step to let them know that you're okay occupying the spaces that they do, because some queer folks and trans folks assume that a lot of their straight and cisgender allies might not want to be in some of the same spaces that they are. But I will say for myself, it means a lot when you hear from your cisgender heterosexual counterparts that it's like, I don't mind going to the queer bar with you. I don't mind going to the pride parade with you. Like, I want to be in the places where you feel seen and you feel affirmed so that I can get a better understanding of your community. Like, that's important.
Absolutely. And listening is such a powerful tool and definitely underutilized a lot of the time. So important to listening in itself is advocacy for sure, and understanding just different perspectives and all of that. Alex.
Yeah, listening. And I actually there's a book that I listened to a couple years ago called How to Listen, and that we're constantly honing that skill of listening, and when we can really, and there's different types of listening, and being able to expand our skill on listening can expand our self-awareness. And so which allows you to take in even more information about yourself and the world around you. But when I read this question earlier, I literally just kind of started making a list, and one of my favorite podcasts is the Anti-Trans Hate Machine: A Plot Against Equality by Amara Jones. She does an amazing heavy, also lots of joy, lots naming some things in the world. Erin in the Morning, I mentioned her earlier. Books, I really enjoy Decolonizing Wellness. That's all I got.
Forgetting about How to Be Queer.
Yeah.
And, well, I did
I was gonna say
How to
that
Be
too.
Queer. Yeah, I'll toot that too. How to Be Queer on Apple and Spotify.
No, perfect. Thank you, you guys. I like how you both answered that with tangible things, but as well as kind of, personal, your personal insight in there. All righty. Well, I think that's all we have time for. If you guys have any last words, feel free to chime in here. But thank you both again so much for taking the time. This was a great conversation. And I know I definitely learned a lot, and I hope our listeners did as well. But any last words from you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if anybody on the chat might have had any questions too, but yeah, if folks want to get in contact with me, I can put my email in the chat box. But yeah, just reiterating that I appreciate being invited into the space. I enjoyed having this conversation with you both, and hopefully the participants were able to get something from this. But yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, same. Wesley, I learned a lot from you. Thanks for sharing everything. And I'll put my information in the chat box too.
Great. Thank you, you guys. Well, have a great rest of your afternoon. Great rest of the summer. And please tap in Wesley and Alex to our future cultural stories. But it was a pleasure working with you both. And I hope to speak with you both again soon. Thanks, guys. Bye.